is a place like no place on earth. Some say to survive it, you need to be as mad as a hatter. Which, luckily, I am. Alice, it's you. You're back. Alice!
Alice!
See? Alice? You're absolutely Alice. I'd know you anywhere. You're all late for tea!
Hello and welcome to my podcast called Fans About Films. This is my very first English language episode. It's the 6th episode, and of course I have an English speaking guest, and this is my guest. He's going to introduce himself now.
Hello there everyone, I am Jackson. I am a student of history and film in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Me and Lasse have been friends and fellow film connoisseurs for several years now, and I'm very happy to be here on the show.
I always like how people who are not German have trouble pronouncing my name.
I know. I was going to ask you before the show. Is it Lasse? I mean, you've told me a couple years ago how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
But yeah, just typical ignorant English speaker, I guess.
Yeah,
I suppose
it's quite difficult. Yeah, Lasse.
Lasse.
It's pronounced Lasse. Actually, I just forgot to introduce myself with name on the show here. That's a great start. Now, my name is Lasse Vogt, and I'm the creator of this podcast. So that's out of the way now. And for all the English language listeners out there, if my English is not perfect or you have a big problem with my accent, I'm very, very sorry.
Don't worry, because to all the other English speakers, I have a very bad speech impediment, so you'll probably be able to understand Lasse's English better than my English, to be honest.
Hey, you pronounced my name correctly.
Hey! Okay, well, I'm doing good on the German pronunciations, just to work on the English stuff now.
Yeah, you can almost call it a wonder.
Oh! Oh, but don't you mean under? Oh.
Well, about our topic today, I actually was talking to Jackson about this a few days back, and we were juggling with a couple of movies we could discuss on this podcast, and I made a few suggestions, and he picked Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, and I actually thought, why not an episode about that movie? Because I guess we have plenty to talk about, even though I don't quite know how you feel about the movie, but I'm gonna find out. Let's just say I actually rewatched the movie yesterday in preparation for this episode, because it's been a few years since I've seen it the last time. And I pretty much live tweeted my viewing, and I also sent Jackson some messages with photos from the movie with reactions of mine. I guess it was quite entertaining to him. It wasn't so entertaining for me. And I don't know if it was really necessary to rewatch the movie, because my opinion hasn't changed much, and I actually was shocked how little I remembered when it comes to details, but the overall story is so simple and so bland that it's actually hard to forget, and then that's very, very weird. But let's hear, what's your opinion on the movie, and why did you want to talk about it?
Well, I should give a little preface to my current feelings about the movie. So I'm a fan of both the original Lewis Carroll book and the original anime Disney film. I think the original anime Disney film of Alice in Wonderland is probably one of my favorite Disney movies from my childhood that I still like presently. the Tim Burton Alice in Wonderland movie, when I first saw it, I saw it with a group of friends, and we all liked it, when we saw it in theaters for the first time. I remember quoting the movie with that group of friends. It was something that we all enjoyed. But over the years, as I began to hear, just in generally broaden my perspective of film criticism, and saw that in the broader film criticism world, this movie had a less stellar reception. I was still thinking, but who doesn't like Alice in Wonderland 2010? It's right up there with a bunch of other classics, such as the 2001 Grinch movie, or oh god, now I'm trying to think of other movies I used to like as a child that I now think are shit. Though I still have a soft spot for the Grinch movie, but after rewatching it a couple years ago, I did not really care for this movie at all. At all. I thought it was obnoxious when I rewatched it. I thought it was a bit, I wouldn't say pretentious, but definitely trying to be more, but also less than what the book was trying to be in certain areas. And my current view is that it's just a very bland and, as you were saying, forgettable but still very easy to remember movie in some regards. I don't really have any strong feelings about it. I know I'm not as huge as a Tim Burton fan as you are, but I do agree it's definitely one of his lesser overall films. And yeah, there's really not much. We are going to be talking about this movie for an hour, but in the grand scheme of things, there's really not much to say about this movie unless you really, start picking through the various details that make it not really work. So that's my view in a nutshell. I assume we'll be dissecting this bland, lifeless, not totally devoid of good ideas, but just uninteresting 2 or so hours of nothing.
You know what? You just saved us a lot of time, because that pretty much is the exact same story I wanted to tell.
Oh, good.
I never read the original book. I watched the Disney cartoon when I was little, and my parents realized that after me and my brothers watched it, we were kind of, let's say, we weren't quite the same. They said we misbehaved and were kooky and out of our minds, and so they locked the movie away pretty much. And so I didn't watch the cartoon until I think I rewatched it for the first time in years, maybe at the end of last year, I guess, because I just bought it on DVD. And I really like it now. I think it's a very entertaining movie. And I know enough of the original story. And when I went to the cinema, I went to the cinema because it was Tim Burton and Johnny Depp and all that stuff. And when I watched it in the cinema, I really liked it. Because, it's Tim Burton, it's Burton, yeah. And then I rewatched it sometimes later, and I was like, no, this is not good. This is really not good. And now we're watching it yesterday, I was like, this is definitely, in my opinion, it's Tim Burton's worst movie, but it's not an awful movie. It's it's not like I don't have really a big hatred for it. It's just sort of there on screen, flopping around blandly. It's really weird. And as I live tweeted, 1.5 minutes in, and already I got frustrated with the dialogue and this weird kind of plot that bookends the movie, with her father trying to, what was it, like he was trying to go another trading route with the ships to China or something.
I believe it was trying to get trading routes to China in order to trade opium. Yeah, they don't say it. I'm not too sure if that's implied in an interview, but I think that's what they were doing.
You know what?
Because
they
opium, it's a drug, and Alice in Wonderland, oh, it's like you're being on drugs, so I guess there's a connection? Not really?
They never say that it's about any drugs, but you know what? This makes a lot of sense.
Yes, it's a bunch of businessmen talking very blandly and very straightforwardly of how to make a very drug-induced experience. I think that's a good analog to the Disney studio executives talking about Alice in Wonderland. It's like, how should we take this material that's supposed to make you feel wacky and unrational and all that. Business. We have to be irrational about it, but still a little quirky in order to work in the proper demographics. That's. I mean, I totally know exactly how the studio executives, because I'm a amateur film critic and I know everything there is about the film business. So yeah, that's how it went down, exactly like that.
Exactly. It's funny that this movie starts off with men in suits. And the movie was pretty much created by men in suits. In a way. And actually noticed something I never noticed before in the opening credits, because it's just, Walt Disney Presents and then the title card. It's not an opening credit sequence, but you see the full moon there in the sky, and a bunch of clouds form the face of a Cheshire cat on the moon. That was pretty nice. That was a pretty neat effect. And then, it's this discussion with young Alice, and they establish her father as this kind of like kooky dude, with his plans with a ship trading and everything. And what a waste of Martin Xokas, because I really like that guy. I think he's a really terrific actor, and he's always wasted in these mini parts. It's so that's really unfortunate, because I really, really like him. I wish he would get more work, in bigger roles, and already I was kind of laughing, because when we have this scene in the carriage with Alice and her mother, and they establish Alice as she's also kind of kooky, but she's actually so incredibly bland, and always when she says that's for the whole movie, every time she says something that's kind of out there and supposed to be kooky and weird, it comes across as so forced and ill-fitting, and it doesn't match her non-existent personality at all. And I don't blame the actress. I really don't blame her. It's just the script gives her nothing to do, and she's just there running around on a green screen, and it's and she's. I think she was a newcomer with this movie, so she didn't have quite the experience to match up for the lack of character the script gave her. And when they ride to this big mansion house, I don't know what it was, to this party, it so obviously is a CGI backdrop. When I was like, oh, we're starting early with this now. And on this part, there's something I find kind of interesting on this party, where you have certain characters that mirror the characters she later meets in Wonderland. You have those female twins who kind of finish each other's sentences, and it's obvious who those are supposed to be. And you have this foppish British snot-nosed douchebag who kind of is like the mirrored Hatter, because he has certain mannerisms, and his cravat kind of reminds me of that. So that I found kind of interesting, at least. But the first 12 minutes are just very, very bland, and then 12 minutes in she falls into the hole, and it's actually it was off to a good start, because I thought the fall through the hole with the piano playing and the music and everything, I was like, this is actually a pretty good mood here that they set up, and then nothing like that ever happens again. That's pretty much one of the only things they take from the novel, and the rest is just like this kind of own story, you know, this made up prequel. No, not prequel. It's actually a sequel. It's, you know what? Alice in Wonderland is this Alice in Wonderland version is Hook.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good analogy. Even though Hook is a much better movie than this, but
it totally is. Yeah, Hook had much more to go off of, and it fits because my second episode on this podcast was about Hook. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually just realized this right now. It has a lot of it has a lot in common with the concept of Hook. Mm-hmm. And then there's also a weird detail I just noticed, because her mother gives her this necklace, and then Alice shrinks down and her dress stays big, so she uses this kind of mini dress that was under it. I don't know how that worked, but the necklace just disappears and never gets brought up again. So I was like, okay, so I guess she lost the necklace in that thing. I don't know if she has it when she comes back. I don't quite know. Maybe I'll post a picture later on this podcast and I will be, oh, there it is. But whatever, I don't know. Maybe it was cut. And then she meets the characters. And I really like...
Characters.
Yes, characters. I actually...
Quotation marks. Characters.
I actually think some of them are a pretty good choice, you know. I mean, Michael Sheen is always a great choice for any movie, and he is good as the White Rabbit. And I really like Matt Lucas as Tweedledum and Tweedledee. I thought that fit, you know. I thought he got a couple of good lines there. And then you have some people who are very wasted. You have the Dodo Bird is voiced by the late Michael Gough, and he just has like 3 lines or something.
Yeah. I think it was like his last major film role, which is
I think so.
A bit of a shame.
Yeah. And and he's not the only one who was wasted here, but we get to that later. And we... I don't know, what do you think? Are there some things, because I don't want to go through the whole movie now, do you have some certain things to remember and you want to mention? And they can both be good and bad.
Things I remember. I mean, I recall most of the first act or so, give or take. The scene at the house, I don't know, it's just a very strange framing device, because, and I think this is a problem that the movie faces throughout, like, the entirety of it, of trying to be both, you know, close to the original source material, or trying to capture the essence of the original source material, while also doing this completely different plot. Because, you know, having the I guess real world characters are supposed to be analogs for the underling characters. I'm not even gonna call it Wonderland. That's not Wonderland to me. That's Underland. If the movie wants to call itself that, I'll call it that. Again, just trying to make these analogs. Like, if Underland was just supposed to be in Alice's head, it would make sense. It's not necessarily a concept that's necessarily very cleverly incorporated. Like, there are lots of other fancier kids movies where the you know, like The Wizard of Oz, where the fantasy world is a reflection of the real world, and the original Wizard of Oz movie works well, but this one just has very weak development, because it's just, oh, here's a character that in the real world that's kind of like the character in the fantasy world, quote unquote. It's a concept that could work. It just is pointless in this instance. I did find her going down the rabbit hole to be, you know, pretty workable. Like, it's like that, in the whole scene in the room where she grows and shrinks a bit. You know, that's just a pretty standard adaptation, just very straightforward. It works.
Yeah.
And once he meets the characters, like I do agree, like many of the character actors they got to play the side characters, I thought did a considerably good job. It's just, I don't know, like once you start getting these characters to work in a group setting, you don't really see their personalities really playing off each other as strongly as you would hope to, because these aren't really characters designed, in the original book, these really weren't characters designed to meet up and discuss, prophecies and high politics or whatnot.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem.
Oh no, I think the prophecy bit deserves the prophecy storyline deserves its own little discussion here. But I don't know, I think the first act of this movie is bland but alright. Like I don't really have too many strong feelings about it. I don't know, I don't really feel that the first act really gives any service to introducing the world too much. It introduces the quote-unquote story and the characters, but it doesn't really give you a sense of Wonderland as anything but a generic, Tim Burton-esque, dreamscape world, because there's swirls and, color palettes change here and there. But
yeah, and the tree from Sleepy Hollow.
Mm-hmm. it's basically that, though. While the saying of Sleepy Hollow, seeped atmosphere, this one doesn't lack atmosphere, but it doesn't really do anything with it. It's just kind of, there.
Yeah, it is. It's actually quite lifeless. But what I say, it's true. There actually is the tree from Sleepy Hollow when she first steps out of the door into Wonderland.
Oh, right. Sorry, I haven't seen Sleepy Hollow in, I think, since I was basically a kid, and that's a great movie to watch when you're a kid. So there's a few details I'm forgetting there, but I don't think Okay, that's an interesting detail.
Yeah, that was actually quite nice. I totally forgot about that. And something else I remember is Alice is actually so bland in this movie that all the other characters in the real world come across as much more fleshed out and colorful in a weird way, but they still treat her like she is the kooky outcast. When she when she runs off after the proposal, and she's like, "Oh, I have to think about this," and she runs away, and the whole big group of people is staring, is looking after her. It's almost like they're gonna burst out of a song like, "Look where she goes, that girl is so peculiar." And it fits because it's the same screenwriter as the original Beauty and the Beast. So in that way, but when it comes to songs, there's a whole other story about this movie. And also I was really shocked because in the here in Germany the rating of a movie is 12, which is pretty much the equivalent of PG-13. I was shocked that this was a PG movie. You have like this big beast getting its eye stabbed out of its skull. You have this. You have her walk on severed heads in a pool of black and later red blood. You have this gruesome decapitation, and it was like, Jesus Christ, this should actually get a PG-13. And when it comes to certain makeup and costume choices, it should get an R.
Yes, I agree.
Because after she escapes this big beast, after the prophecy scene, show her the oraculum. Oh man, and actually, I actually think Alan Rickman was very, very good in that role, and he's really missed. You know, when you hear his voice in a movie like this, you know, it's like, oh god damn it, you know, he was gone too soon. It's really sad. The second Alice in Wonderland was actually his last role, and he has like, I don't know, 4 lines in that movie. But in this one, he plays a major part, and I think he did it very well. And after she escapes this thing with a prophecy, and also, yeah, I want to talk about that goddamn mouse, because I really hate that character. There's this mouse. She's called Maliankin or something, I don't know. And she has this needle sword, and she stabs the beast's eye out. The Bandersnatch! And she's such a dick. She's such a bitch, you know. She's always just waving her sword around, no matter if it makes sense or not. And she's always mean to Alice, you know, and I get that she's in doubt that she's a real Alice, because that's the whole dialogue. Because it's not the real Alice, and yeah, and she's just always so mean. And the weird thing I also noticed, only some characters introduce themselves with their names to Alice, but later she calls them by their names, and we never see a scene where she learns their names. You know, she only learns like the names of Absalom and Tweedledum and Tweedledee, and later she calls the White Rabbit McTwisp, and she calls the mouse Maliankin, and they never introduce themselves to her. So I was like, how does she know their names? Here's something missing, I guess. Yeah, that's something that really bothered me. And then you have when the cat first shows up, there's actually some magic in that, because they really get, with the animation and Stephen Fry's voice, they really do get certain aspects of the character right. You know, when it comes to the origins, except when it comes to the logical plot, which doesn't make sense. We get to that later. He actually...
Sorry, go ahead.
I actually really liked his introduction scene. And it was moody, the animation was good, the voice was good, and the way the camera pans up and you see the moon, and the moon forms into the cat with the eyes, and the moon is now the grin. I really like that. Yeah, what did you have to say about that?
Oh, I just wanted to comment on his line of how he never gets involved in politics.
Yeah, I never get involved in politics, even though he that's so stupid, because why?
But you see, go ahead.
Why do they? That's so weird, you know, because this story, Alice in Wonderland, is gift wrapped for Tim Burton, because many critics criticize him and his movies about the fact that he often doesn't really have a story. You know, he kind of has non-stories, or the stories are told through the characters. You know, could you tell me what the story of Batman Returns is? Probably not, because the characters are the story in that movie. But in this one, now he has this movie, which is just, you know, this weird kind of road trip where she meets weird characters and they share a scene and then she moves on. And that's just perfect fit. And then those morons from the studio and the author, they give it a story, and now he has to take the blame for it, you know, because it's not his fault, you know. He was just, I get the feeling that he was like, in some respects, like a goon for hire, you know, because like, oh, here you can have all your trademark actors and everything, but you know, this is the script, and you stick to the script, you puppet. That's the feeling I get, because it's just. It feels the autopilot often, and it's just, you know, the fact that this has the story of rising up, you know, and a tyrant who overthrows the land. And it's just, you have a cake that can make you grow. Use it to squash the queen or something. And it's so stupid. Later she grows like a few foot taller, and then she doesn't do anything with it. And it's so... You know, that's the problem when you try to bring logic in something that shouldn't have logic. Yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. And then she gets to the tea party, and that opens a whole lot of other problems. Why don't you go ahead?
Oh, the tea party scene. Well, the tea party scene is when we introduce probably when I first saw the movie, my favorite character, and when I saw the movie again, my least favorite character, the Mad Hatter.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't think Johnny Depp was a bad choice for the Mad Hatter. It's just the way he plays it is just not at all engaging or interesting. It reminds me kind of, not so much the actual performance Depp did for other Tim Burton movie, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but this kind of the overall approach. Doing a weird, quirky person with a very pale white face, not in a way that you expect him to do it, but not necessarily in a very interesting way either. Like, if you compare this movie's Mad Hatter to the Mad Hatter in the animated film, like, that character is very just straightforward, nutty and off the wall, but he's still enjoyable to watch.
Totally.
He still has a defined character that you immediately latch onto, and you're fine in, going with him through at least a good, 10-minute portion of that film.
Yeah.
I understand that, like, Depp was trying to maybe do, like, a, person with, like, various personalities going on, but I don't really think that works, or it's not emphasized enough. Like, he's trying to be somewhat subtle about it in a role that really shouldn't be subtle.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the biggest problem. Like, he's trying to bring a certain nuance to the quirkiness of it, but it doesn't really work in this particular context because it's not a story about, like, if it was more so focused on that personality, or like on his different personalities and whatnot, like in a more nuanced script or a more nuanced movie, it might work. But he's supposed to be a side character in this, I guess, fantasy war adventure coming of age teen something or another movie, and it just doesn't work. Nor does his I guess you would say his freaking Wheel of Fortune of a selection of accents that he throws on off.
Yeah, like every other sentence he changes his accent. At one point he's British, then he's American, then he's Scottish, and then he's nonsense. I would recognize her anywhere. I would know her anywhere. And sometimes he lisps and sometimes he doesn't. It's really, and then he has this dark Scottish monologue when he takes her to the burned village. The Bandersnatch. No,
yeah.
The Jabberwocky. How could I mistake it? And
if he went... Go ahead.
No, it's your turn.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think if he went, like, really over the top with these different personalities, it might work better. But it's too controlled. That's the problem. He's trying to do something that should be very expressive and very big and over the top. Like, if he, with his body got more into the performance, it'd be interesting. But throughout his various personalities, it's all kind of just the same body language, the same general tone. It's just a slightly different accent with, a few different inflections here and there. It's, again, it's like the rest of the movie. It's trying to be both a very serious, a very, internally consistent type thing, trying to make sense and be logical and nuanced and serious, but also trying to be quirky and funny and, show us that, he's a mad person, so of course he does these quirky things, but it's not entertaining. It's a very dry, very sheltered, very, sterilized type of quirkiness. It's being quirky for the sake of being quirky while not having that quirkiness be interesting.
Yeah, you made a really good point there, because this character portrayed the exact same way would actually be kind of awesome in an R-rated independent movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a slightly less silly version of the recent Shyamalan movie, I guess. Whose name I'm forgetting at the moment.
Split?
Yes, Split. This would basically be a more I guess you could say a more subtle version of Split in some regard. Like, yeah, I think this type of character could work in like a horror movie, or even like in a drama, like actually looking at people, like take a very serious look at I forget the dissociative identity disorder, which I'm looking up right now on Wikipedia, just to be sure. Like, I think that'd be an interesting idea in another movie, but the way that Depp was trying to do it in this particular movie just doesn't work at all. Again, if he played it out more and made it more entertaining, more hammy, I think this would be a case where I'd be more open for a more hammy performance, because that's what I think. That's how I think it would work in an Alice in Wonderland movie.
Yeah. I think he has some moments where he works, but he had the way they overplay him and the way he's top built and everything. It's just too much. The original restrained the Mad Hatter, because that character is funny and fine in that scene, and I think he comes later in at the end, in the trial or something. But when you would put up with this character through the whole movie, I think it would get kind of grating, and so they restrain him. And here you have to put up with him through the whole movie, and he actually gets much more serious as the movie goes on, and the way they, in the second movie, they actually give him this tragic backstory with his family and everything, and it's just really not needed. And also in the second movie, they establish that all these characters, like the Cheshire Cat, Tweedledum and Tweedledee, and I think the White Rabbit and the March Hare, they all hang out together when they were kids already, because Alice goes back in time in that movie, and no matter where she goes, they are always in a group, or when she goes, rather. They're always in a group, I guess they were buddies for life from a very young age. Whatever. But in that scene also, I like the look of it, it's like this kind of... that's one part where this kind of world shaken by war aspect of the story works, because you have this kind of bleak landscape and the fog, and in the middle of it you have this tea party with a house in the background that kind of looks like the March Hare. And I thought it was a very interesting kind of dark but creative image. But the other problem is we get introduced to the March Hare, and to me, he's the most goddamn annoying character in this movie. Who played it? Paul Whitehouse, I guess?
Let me see. It was Paul Whitehouse.
And he gets more annoying with each scene, and so much that at one point I couldn't understand what he was saying, because I was following him fine through the movie, and then all of a sudden he did an accent, I don't know what it was, but I couldn't understand him. I had to put on the subtitles to understand what he was saying when Alice goes in the kitchen, in the Castle of the White Queen, and there he is like just making a mess in the kitchen, and he screams at her, and I didn't understand what he was saying, and I'm paraphrasing here what he said, but this is how it sounded. Gay, you're late for your soup, you wee bosom.
Gay, you're late for your soup, you wee bosom.
That was what he was saying, and what he was saying was, "You're late for your soup, you wee bosom." Like, all right, he sounded exactly like that. Really, that was so odd. Yeah, but he was grating in this, and the other thing. What do you think of Crispin Glover in this movie?
Uncomfortable.
In which way? Please explain.
In the way that he as an actor looks like how he looks like on the set, like he looks uncomfortable being in this role. The reaction of other actors in this movie, and my own reaction, because Crispin Glover as the Knave of Hearts, like it's this attempt to, I guess, make this character that's supposed to be, the complex, diplomat, sword behind the throne type character that's supposed to be manipulative, even though he really doesn't do shit at all through most of this movie. He just kind of shows up and attacks people. I think his design is kind of cool. I think if it was redesigned a bit more and placed in a different circumstance, it might work better. But again, it's definitely the trying to be weird and creative, but not going too far, or else people might think people might actually think this movie has some, true imagination behind it, instead of just taking elements from the original source material and tweaking it just so much so it's still marketable, but not really, out there. Yeah, I mean, he's kind of just a throwaway character, and I don't think Glover really gives anything noteworthy about it. He's just kind of the majority of the characters in this movie, he shows up, there's a few things that are interesting about him, but he doesn't really leave too much of an impact.
Yeah. I have a problem with I actually quite like his design, but I have a problem with the way they executed it, how they CGI'd his body to make his limbs larger. It's longer, and it's just so obvious that they CGI'd around it, so he always looks like one of those big rubber mannequins you see in front of a car sales.
Oh, okay. I'm just looking up an image. I can kind of see that. Yeah.
Especially the way he moves. I sent you a clip where he walks towards the camera, and it just was very unnerving. Mm-hmm. And also, the way he hits on Alice later on in the movie.
That's what I meant by uncomfortable.
He's just, I like you. I like largeness. And that scene, I saw that scene and I was like, you know what? I actually really want to see a movie with him and Brad Dourif in the main roles. And the movie is called Trying to Out-Creep Each Other.
I would watch that movie.
I would so watch that movie because they are perfect for each other.
Oh no, I think if Brad Dourif was in this movie and Burn just let him go off, I think that might be the case of having a golden role in the middle of a shitty ass movie.
And also, they had to make it an R rating. Mm-hmm. Totally. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, because it's kind of like, the way he sometimes stands behind the throne of the queen, I was like, did they try to get Brett Dourif, but they couldn't get him, and he was doing like the Rob Zombie Halloween movies at the time? You know, because he so reminded me of Grimer Wormtongue in those scenes. It was kind of interesting that way.
Yeah, I mean, definitely not as strong of a character as Wormtongue, but
No.
Yeah, interesting comparison, and yeah, you can definitely see how this movie is trying to be other, high fantasy, political war movies in a way, and just failing because it tries to shoehorn the original source material into roles that really don't. Just doesn't really work. Now, I should mention I think a couple years ago, I'm not too sure if you saw this, but there's a show called Once Upon a Time in Wonderland that kind of does this concept in kind of the same way, but kind of different. I haven't seen too many episodes, but it does take the Alice Wonderland lore and try to do a more serious, kind of more political approach to it. I haven't seen the entire thing, as I said, so I can't really give a definitive answer if it works or not. But from the stuff I've seen, it definitely does incorporate the source material and mobilize it to make it work a bit more in that type of setting. Like the characters, even though they're the characters from the book, they're not trying to be both, weird and quirky and also dead on serious. It's very much its own thing, and that's I think is really what this film, the Tim Burton film, really struggles and really fails at doing. I think the Crispin Glover element, I like how I call it the Crispin Glover element. That's because every movie needs a Crispin Glover element to it, of course.
Yeah.
I think like his character and the Mad Hatter are a good example of trying to transcribe the original source material into something that it's something that's recognizable, something that it's like, okay, I get that, I recognize that, and trying to put that in these different roles, these more nuanced and plot dependent roles, and just not working. Again, I think this idea of a movie could work, or this idea of a more serious Alice in Wonderland production or story could work. It's just this one just doesn't work. I think that's what you can just say about it. It just doesn't work in any department it's trying to work in. It doesn't work as the outright quirkiness that the original book had. It doesn't work as a serious political story. It definitely doesn't work as a merger between the two. It just doesn't work.
Yes.
I give them a bit of effort for trying to be somewhat ambitious with this, but it's still a very lazy story, so I can't really give them too much, credit.
Yeah.
But
you have clearly people who are trying here. I don't think any of the actors are sleepwalking through it or anything. They give it their all. You can see Helena Bonham Carter has fun, and I actually think her design fits the character. It's supposed to be kind of off-putting, and she, even though she sometimes reminds me of Lord Farquaad from Shrek, in the way they designed her, I think actually she works. The problem is that they don't tell the joke until the end, because I think in the original book it's like, she always says like, off with his head, and then at the end of the day she always has to turn it back, because if they really would decapitate all of her people, she would soon be alone. and I guess that's part of a book, if I'm not mistaken. You know, where she actually pardons them at the end of the day again. But I'm not quite sure, but I heard something about that. And that
I'm not too sure. Yeah, go ahead.
That actually is quite funny. Even though in the original Disney cartoon you don't see them again when she says off with their heads, but whatever. And in this one you just have to assume, especially giving all the heads around the castle. I guess she kills them. Oh, okay, why not? And yeah, but I think that works. You clearly have ambition here. I mean, okay, that's not a surprise. I mean, I'm a sucker for Danny Elfman anyway, but this is actually a really good score. He really, really does a good job with the music. And funny enough, in the trailer, they use his score from Hellboy 2.
Alice has returned to Wonderland.
Since you've been gone, the Red Queen has taken over all of Wonderland.
Find up!
Help us make the world right again.
Yeah, which is a much better movie, of course. But I actually think his music is very, very good in this movie. And I also like the design of Queen's soldiers, because they are not the traditional playing cards, but they keep enough of them that you can recognize them as like over-exaggerated playing cards, just, you know, with armor on and all that stuff. I actually like that. And you know, it's not like, I think sometimes the movie looks, no, most of the time actually the movie looks actually quite ugly. And there you can see another big problem, because I don't think Tim Burton is the guy who can create magical worlds out of nothing, you know, with a computer. He's a guy who needs sets to direct. He needs sets to branch out his style. And in this, where everything is CGI, it's just, I think he's kind of lost, you know. It feels, the whole movie feels directionless in the way it's staged. Especially later in the battle scene, there are certain points where I noticed that, and I mean the CGI animals and the humans, and every time she shrinks down, that works quite fine, but every time, you know, we have these big sweeping camera pans, which are basically just look 3D, you know. This is like, this is a ride, or something. And there's also this, funny enough, when I watched the scene where she walks on the severed heads, I almost, you know, the way she jumped from head to head, and had to cross I don't know, the pool or whatever it was. It was kind of like, I was expecting like a little flash on the screen which says, "This is in the video game, check this out."
I have actually played the tying game, or at least a portion of the tying game for this movie.
Really? There was a tying game? I didn't know.
Yeah, it's actually much better than the movie, because I will say, speaking of set designs, I would say the set designs in the game are much better than the movie, because it feels more, because the CGI characters in the game blend in much easier with the CGI backgrounds, and the live action and, you know, CGI characters in the movie blend into the green screen backgrounds. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that really annoys me throughout the movie. This movie definitely feels, for the most part, like, in terms of its visual look, like, all right, here's a couple actors, you know, a prop in the middle of a soundstage, and everything else, it just feels detached.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel like a coherent, you know, well-built world. Like, if you look at something like, I don't know, like Lord of the Rings, or you can just, you know, take your pick. Like, the choice of scenery and how the actors are blended into it is much better. Like, it feels like one one big world. This just feels like a disconnected, like it's trying to be this serious political, grounded in a certain reality type story, but the world itself feels very superficial and flat. And again, that could work if this movie was trying to be more like the original.
Yes,
like
exactly.
If you watch the animated film, this is a animation technique I really like about that film. Like how Alice will go from one area, then when she leaves another area, she'll kind of enter into this dark void almost.
Yeah.
And so I really like that because it kind of gives a nice visual segue from one part of this world to another part, and it feels like you. And I think that's how the book feels like. It feels like you go from one chapter, you enter this void, then you go to another chapter. That's how Wonderland should feel like, just this disconnected world of these various episodes and experiences. But when you're trying to give a grounded war story, that type of visual style, which I don't even think was intentional on Burns' part, maybe with the exception of the Cheshire Cat scene, as you said before, that I felt played with the atmosphere to a great extent. But like the Tea Party scene, like that feels... Again, it just seems like there's a table, there's Johnny Depp, there's Crispin Glover, then there's a bunch of CGI crap running around, and it's just in this void of, kind of above average, CGI backgrounds, but still not really well done. The battle scene at the end, like that just feels like such a underwhelming location. Like this should be a very interesting and very vibrant looking, location and scenery for your climax, but this feels very, very, very disconnected from the action that's going on.
Yeah.
I'll say like the stuff in the intro when Alice first gets into Wonderland. Most of the other like as you said, the flying scenes, the stuff in the forest. The only couple sets I think actually work is the more physical sets, as you were saying before, like the Wig Queen and the White Queen's, their two respective castles. Like the interiors of them actually feel like, okay, this feels. If I were to want to think that this is a grounded reality of a movie that has some grounding in reality.
Yeah.
I think these sets, work perfectly fine. Again, I think that's not an approach I really care for. But if that was the consistent direction they were going with, I think those sets work fine. But you don't really get too many, exaggerated over the top sets or exaggerated over the top areas. It's always in this safe in between of kind of weird and dark and quirky, but not really interesting, not really distinct or something that really grabs you. It just kind of all blends into this big old mess of grays and blacks, and occasionally you get some reds and blues that break it up. But it just feels like the background of this movie just feels like a big wash until you get to more distinct areas with distinct color palettes. But yeah, this for a filmmaker who oftentimes really does make these very interesting and creative environments, like in Burns' 2 Batman movies, or even Planet of the Apes to some extent. I can't believe I'm using that as a positive example. to me, I think that movie is a bit worse than this one to some extent, just in terms of I just think the problems in that movie are a bit more damning than this one.
Damn you all to hell.
Yes. At least as shoehorned as some of the source material in this movie is, at least it wasn't that.
I'm sorry, I like the Planet of the Apes.
Better
than this.
Don't worry.
I like it better than this. I don't like it, but I like it better than this.
No worries, man. No
problem. No problem. I didn't take it the wrong way. It was just, sorry, but I think Alice in Wonderland is worse overall, because at least, in Planet of the Apes, kick-ass makeup and Tim Roth doing I don't know what, but fuck, it's entertaining.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's just stick to Alice in Wonderland. I'm sorry I brought that up.
Yeah, you know what? The way you described the movie and the look actually made me realize something. The way this movie looks, like always kind of dark and dirty and murky and gritty and unpleasant. It looks like Tim Burton is trying to rip off Terry Gilliam.
Kind of. That's actually a pretty damp example.
Yeah.
To be honest, I haven't seen as many Terry Gilliam films as I would want, but I would kind of say that.
Yeah, it actually has quite the similarities to some of Terry Gilliam's movies. And not really thematically, even though, you know, there's also weird stuff going on, like that dwarf time travel movie. I'm not quite sure how it was called.
Oh, Time Bandits.
Yeah, Time Bandits. That's it. And also this one with a weird girl with the talking puppet heads. Tideland. Yeah.
Yeah, Tideland.
That was it. You know, it's kind of like a merge of that mixed in with Dr. Parnassus. And I think Dr. Parnassus was after this. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was.
No, before.
Oh, really? Before? All right.
Yeah, it's 2009.
Oh, that makes it even... Yeah, you're right, of course. Because of Heath Ledger, yeah, of course. You know, that makes it even more obvious, you know, the similarities. It's like they saw Dr. Parnassus and they were like, oh, you know, that look, kind of, you know, we can do that, but just on a bigger budget and don't really make it look that much more interesting. Yeah, that was something I noticed. And the way you described, you know, the disconnection between the locations, yeah, exactly, that would work if it was like the original, you know, she goes from one place to another, but in this, where you have these politics over it, you never have the feeling of one consistent world, and you should. You know, even in Lord of the Rings, even though their locations are different, you can see it is the same world. And in Star Wars also. And there are different planets in those movies. And you always see it's the same universe. Even in something as outrageous as like Guardians of the Galaxy, you always have a connection between everything in the way everything looks. And in this one, not really. And what was it? And the way they play out the battle at the end, I liked some of the implications there, because the way it's on a chessboard, on a big chessboard, and also some of the soldiers look like chess figures, it actually kind of sums up that the conflict in this movie is just two sisters being mad at each other. So it's like, you know, it's just, you know, this chess game, but bigger, in the way that it's just a conflict between... It's a sibling rivalry, you know? And one of them is the mad little girl who wants everything, and the other one tries to be calm, but is also crazy in her own way. And it's kind of nice how it's this conflict that under normal circumstances, you know, in the real world, would be just between two siblings, but in this they overthrow the land with war. And it's still represented as a chess game. I actually thought that was... I don't know if that was the intention, but I thought it was kind of clever. But also, but also it's weird that the Jabberwocky is just next to the chess game. I guess he sleeps there. Yeah, and then it's Christopher Lee, and he says 3 lines, and then he gets his tongue cut out. So it was, and it's a nice callback, because I think he also has a connection to the source material in a way that I guess he read it in a audiobook version or something. I don't quite know, but and of course, I mean, it's Christopher Lee. He was a Burton regular, so I guess he was happy to get that little part. But then and then you have a gruesome decapitation, and you know, the Mad Hatter wielding a sword, which actually the way they designed him was quite fitting. Because, I sent you one picture of him, and I was like, Mad Hatter or Pennywise the Clown, you decide. Because there are some shots in this movie where he looks creepier than both incarnations of Pennywise, either the Tim Curry one or the or the new one that's coming out. I'm actually really looking forward to. But you know, he looks so creepy in some parts, especially the way they made his eyes bigger. It's just so unnerving, and also how he kind of there was one scene that really creeped me out. How he lusted over her in several scenes, especially in the end, and also when he gets freed from the prison and he goes to the White Queen, and then he first sees Alice in her normal size, and then he's like, oh, it's you again, but now it's your real size, and it's a very good size, you know, it's a very very well fitting Alice size, and through the whole conversation he's staring at her chest. He really does, and I'm like, okay, I guess I think it's implied, you know, I think it's intentional, but like, what the hell, Disney? Like, it's really weird how he hits on her in several scenes, and you have almost this kind of semi-sexual lover tension between them in the goodbye scene when he leans to her like, farewell, Alice, or whatever they say in that Wonderland slang. And it's following I think one of the cringiest scenes ever put on film. Maybe you know what I'm talking about without me mentioning it.
Cringiest?
Yeah,
cringiest.
The cringiest, one of the cringiest scenes ever put on film. It's right before they say goodbye. Yeah, it's like, Jesus Christ, it's just, why? Just why? You know,
because it's quirky.
Because it's fireworking. Oh,
yeah, fucking 3 minutes after his bro decapitations. Not even 3 minutes, like 3 seconds.
And also, but before that, it was actually one of the funniest scenes when the Red Queen gets banned, and she's like to the knave, like, we still have each other, and he tries to kill her, and then he gets taken away with her, and he's to the Red Queen like, kill me, please kill me. That actually made my father laugh out loud in the cinema, because I was like, you know what, that's actually pretty funny. And the way she looks at him, you know, it's like, yeah, that fits. And also, I don't know, I guess you didn't see the sequel.
No,
because in the sequel, the Red Queen is back, and at one point you see a throne standing there in the castle wherever she lives now. You see a throne standing there, and the knave, and you see the skeleton of the knave stabbed with his own sword. And I was like, well, I guess that's it. Bye. You know, like he was killed off between movies, and it was just very weird. Seeing a skeleton sitting there, I almost forgot that. Because the sequel, you know, objectively, the sequel is a much, much worse movie than this. But it didn't infuriate me as much, because it wasn't Tim Burton directing it, for one, and two, it was like, you know, this is a contractual obligation. What can you expect? You know, because the first one had actually effort, and it had promise to be a good movie. This movie could have been great, you know, it could have been really awesome, and they missed the big opportunity. And the second one is just, you know, there was no promise in this, even though Sacha Baron Cohen was quite amusing in the movie. Did you even know he was in that?
Yeah, I saw leading up to the movie that he was in that, but again, I have no interest in that movie whatsoever.
Yeah, you should. He actually, his performance is makes the movie worthwhile, at least for a little bit. But it's not worth sitting through the whole movie, because it seems like he ad-libbed some of his lines. He actually was the only entertaining actor in that movie, and yes, in this one, the father wagon scene, you know, I actually kind of forgot about it, and when it came up, when I saw it yesterday, I was like clawing in the couch, you know, because it was just such a soul crushing moment. It's like, oh god, this is so embarrassing. It was like, even the animators didn't try with this. They were like, oh Jesus Christ, I have to animate this photowork scene. Click, click, click here. Whatever, shove it out there, it's fine. Just don't make me look at this anymore. And the very ending of the movie, I think, is one of the worst endings I've ever seen, because it just makes zero sense. And it's in a movie called Alice in Wonderland, and when I have to say about the ending of a movie like this, that it doesn't make any sense, then that's really bad. Because suddenly she has an interest in the trading companies and everything, and says, well, this is the plan of my father, but I think we can take it further, right to Hong Kong and everything. And her almost father-in-law was like, oh, well, I've heard some of these ideas, you know, maybe we should try it out. And then she sails on her ship away. You know, the way that she suddenly is the strong, independent woman is so forced and so lazy and so inappropriate for the time. You know, I'm all for girl empowering figures and everything. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the Powerpuff Girls did this with much more dignity and logic than anything in this. You know, this is just, this doesn't fit at all. You know,
okay, sorry, that's actually very funny, because when you think about it, this movie, like, the movie is trying to suggest, like, you know, like, you shouldn't, you know, conform to the rules that society, you know, has outlined for you. You know, you have to determine your own, you know, path. You have to be independent, more, you know, be your own person. But the essence of the war plot in the movie is, no, Alice, you don't have any choice. You have to conform to what the prophecy says you have to do. Like, it's so ironic. And I do think, like, maybe the message of Alice, you know, having, like, this kind of empowerment, especially like female empowerment in the Victorian age, I think that could work in a movie like this. But it would have to be, I mean, you'd actually have to set up that character development, that character arc, and not just shoehorn the end of it at the end of your movie. You actually have to show the beginnings and the various conflicts within that arc. Like, wouldn't it make more sense in this? I think it would make much more sense, and you could still do like a war-type movie if you made, you know, the war in Wonderland, like, just really crazy and over the top. Like, maybe they're fighting over, like, making it this big, giant bat war over a very silly thing. Like, wouldn't it be so funny if the Red Queen and the White Queen were literally fighting each other because they were disputing, you know, who won and lost in, like, a, you know, card game they played as, you know, children or something? Like, that would make sense in a Wonderland setting. Like, you could still have all these big important speeches, but it all boils down to this very stupid, silly thing. And you kind of get that with the Wig Queen at the beginning, when she executes one of her servants for, you know, eating a strawberry tart or something. You know, her being kind of this, you know, parody of a person with unlimited power who sees herself as, you know, so classy and civilized and whatnot, but, you know, brutally murders people for the, you know, smallest things. Like, that, I think that could work, because I always felt, you know, in the original book that this was definitely not a, you know, a direct satire of anything, but more so just poking fun at, you know, agreed upon attitudes of, you know, the Victorian age, or just really any age in general. And, you know, you could definitely make a more coherent, more structured story. And heck, even certain like war movies, like actual war movies, you know, about actual, you know, historical wars and whatnot, can sometimes take a kind of comedic or almost satiric look at the source material. That could be, this is what that movie could have been if they wanted to make a war movie. Now, I don't think that's the direction they should have taken it, but there were so many. If they were to take in that direction, there were so many different and better ways to take it. And I think it would, if they wanted to give Alice an actual good character development, like she could start off as as being quirky and being a rebel and being against order and people telling her what to do, but after being dropped into a world of just pure chaos and having to actually insert some control both on herself in order to control the world around her, I think that would be a more powerful a more powerful story, more powerful character arc, and actually tie into whatever the fuck they were trying to do at the end about she's in business now. Like, you don't necessarily have to go with the whole Alice has to accept the roles that society defines for her, but you could make a message of sometimes you have to it's always good to be yourself, but sometimes you have to structure your life and structure the world around you, because if everyone just was was crazy like the people in Wonderland, or either crazy with order or crazy with chaos, then no shit would get done. So that's just kind of me brainstorming on how this movie could have been perhaps a bit better. Again, I'm not saying that if I were to make this movie, I can make it better, but I think that would just be a more interesting, may not be the most serious or more compelling, but it would just make more sense in a world that doesn't make sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you actually made very good points there. Even a movie like Sucker Punch, you can see is kind of inspired by Alice in Wonderland in a way.
Yeah, kind of.
And actually,
because sucks. Sorry.
Yeah, it's Sucker Punch sucks. Yeah.
Zack Snyder. We mentioned a Zack Snyder movie because we always have to mention a Zack Snyder movie when we talk about.
Oh damn it! I didn't think about that. Sorry.
And make a freaking Zack Snyder swear jar or something.
Damn, I don't hate Zack Snyder. I like some of his movies. I don't even think Sucker Punch is awful or anything. It's just like a movie I really don't understand. I think he doesn't understand. But whatever. Yeah, you made very, very good points there. I really agree with you. Before we get to our conclusion, because we're running out of time, one more thing before we can give our 2 cents, our final 2 cents on the movie. The part where she grows and she gets spotted by the Red Queen, and she's like, "Well, what's your name, girl?" And the White Rabbit, her name is and Alice goes with it and says from Umbridge, she's just she's making up the bullshit story that fits with the things, and actually I thought that was kind of fine, but the way she said from Umbridge. Now I was picturing a certain character coming into the scene and saying, "You shall tell no lies, Mr. Potter." that was quite kind of weird. I guess I should have mentioned that. Yeah, but. Whatever. So, in conclusion to our not quite rant, but really deep discussion, what would be your final quick thoughts of a movie or anything else you want to mention about it?
Nothing really else to mention about it. Again, I think there are some positives to it. A good amount of the casting choices are, particularly with the voice actors, are pretty good. I do think the makeup and the costume designs, when they're not terrifying or lazy, are pretty good. Again, if they actually did some more world building, this could actually be, I think that's a good foundation to build a kind of more serious, grounded Alice in Wonderland, or a different interpretation of Alice in Wonderland on. I think that kind of works. But yeah, to be honest, there's just nothing really compelling about this movie. It it's trying to be everything, or not everything. It's trying to be several things, and in the end, it ends up being nothing. It tries to be serious, but when the serious parts don't work, it's like, oh well, it's Wonderland. It's supposed to be quirky, but it doesn't really follow through with the quirkiness that much. What can you say? The characters are mostly bland and undeveloped. The story's bland and undeveloped. The world building is, for the most part, bland and undeveloped. The tone switches all over the place for no reason than because it's, again, supposed to be quirky, even though it isn't. It is a failure, but it's not really something that, keeps me up late at night. It's not a horrible thing to watch. You could, I think to the average film goer, you could probably get through it pretty easily. I think I would just be bored watching it again, but I think it's bad, but I don't know. It's not overtly offensive. I really just dissected it from the rest of Tim Burton's filmography, or at least the filmography that I like, and it's just, to me, it's just a product. It's just something that Burton did. Perhaps he had some passion behind it, and from what interviews I've read about it, he did seem to have a lot of conviction behind the changes he made. But again, I can never really make a for sure statement about how these big budget movies are, how the creativity is balanced between the writer and the director and the studio executives. To me, however way you look at it, it's just it's a pretty mainstream product. I understand, and even at some point like the film, but at this point, it's just too safe, too dark at some points, and just not very interesting. It's just bland.
Yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts exactly. I quite liked it when it first came out, and I also saw it in 3D, I remember. And that was like the beginning of a big 3D craze. It came out shortly after Avatar, and it was post-converted and everything. And
yeah.
So yeah, and then I rewatched it later, and I was like, this is really not very good. When I actually got into filmmaking and what it all meant, and I was a big sucker for Tim Burton and Danny Elfman at that time, and later when I actually found out, like, oh man, this seems like studio controlled. It's just he's doing his job. I think he got paid well, and you're right. I think there's some passion going on with him, but it was the wrong technique for him, I guess. He's not the guy to create wondrous worlds just with CGI backdrops. He needs something else, and he needs a story that benefits it. Actually, he needs a lack of a story to benefit it. There's some, there are some nice performances, there are some nice scenes in there. For the most part, it's just a pretty generic, bland movie of an outrageous source material that got cut down for the mainstream, but they added gruesome violence for some reason. It's really, really weird that this movie's PG, but it's also weird that The Lone Ranger was rated PG-13 and wasn't R. That is actually the first unofficial R-rated Disney movie, in my opinion, The Lone Ranger. Because I've never seen a Disney film that was so gruesome like that one. Maybe that's a topic of another conversation, but Jesus. Actually, I think we talked about that a few years back when it was on my worst list. And this one, it's a generic, bland movie that doesn't deserve its title. It's just Alice goes back to Wonderland, and it's clearly not what the title promises, and it is. The characters from the book are kind of there, but they don't do much. Yeah, we agree on this. It's not an awful movie. It's just generically bad. Before we say goodbye, it's plug time.
All right. So if anyone has any interest in whatever I do have a few quote-unquote short films on my YouTube page. It's just called Jack Sanderson on YouTube. And if you're so interested in my very occasional thoughts and more occasional retreat of other people's thoughts on movies and other events, you can follow me at Twitter at Jackson Wayne. That's capital both on the Jackson and the Wayne.
Great.
So, anyways, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. It was a pleasure dissecting this bland mess of a alright film.
Yeah. I also will link your YouTube in the video description, so we won't get lost. Just send me that later.
All right.
Yeah, it was very fun talking to you. I think I did quite fine with my first English language episode. I hope I can reach more people with this. I hope I can see you on another episode, not so far in the future. It has been a lot of fun as always talking with you about movies. Now you can say your goodbye, and then I can say my goodbye.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. Hopefully I can be back on the show again. Take care.
Thank you very much. And also, please visit oliverzeidelmusic.com. He writes fantastic music. He's a great composer. He composed the intro and outro music for this video. Please check him out. The link is in the video description. You can find me also on Twitter, on Facebook, and on this channel, TheDeppert, on YouTube. I have several English language videos. All the links you can find here. Thank you very much for listening to us. This was Fans About Films. I say goodbye, and Jackson says goodbye, and we will see you later on the next episode. Take care.
Yeah, take care.